everyone! If you've seen my last video, you'll notice I have a new model. It was designed and drawn by me and rigged by Buggsy. I'll link their socials down below. Go check them out. Now, I was planning on making my next video about Franziska von Karma and how becoming a prosecutor at such a young age meant she was never really allowed to be a child and how that continues to affect her. But I recently finished playing the investigations games and I had to talk about my pathetic wet cat of a son, Eustace Winner. To summarize, Eustace, or Sebastian if you can't let go yet, is an amazing example of child abuse and how easily it can go undetected. Trigger warnings for this video are child abuse, specifically verbal, physical, and emotional, murder, and kidnapping. When we first meet Eustace in Case 2 of Prosecutor's Gambit, he immediately comes off as annoying, egotistical, and unaware. It's made clear quite quickly that Verity Gavel is the competent one guiding him, and players are left wondering why such a prosecutor would be assigned to a case over Edgeworth, and how did such a child pass the bar exam in the first place? When arguing with him, multiple subtle things are revealed. First, he doesn't feel the need to construct a coherent argument. He thinks that sounding smart and confident is all he needs. Second, he expects nothing but praise and to be congratulated on a good argument. When Edgeworth questions him and fights back, he's shocked and struggles to support his arguments on his own. Third, he trusts others implicitly. He takes everything at face value and rarely questions things, such as when Edgeworth is incorrect. He takes Edgeworth's confidence to mean that he is correct, no matter the evidence presented. And finally, fourth, he has a tendency to hit himself when he makes a mistake. That one's not subtle, but the implications of it are. The way I see it, that's what he expects. He expects to be hurt after making a mistake, associates pain and failure, and so he hits himself. Later, when Franziska whips him, he has no objections. He just shuts up and cries. I believe these to be signs of Excelsius hitting him at home. Supporting this is also his flinch or shock animation. He holds his arm up to shield himself and shrinks down. Looking at the other characters, Edgeworth also raises an arm, but it only goes up to his torso. Eddie has his hands up in a sort of surrendering pose. Kay leans forward. None of them shield themselves or feel like they're in any danger. And when Excelsius simply approaches Eustace, he flinches. He's clearly scared of his dad and feels a need to protect himself on instinct despite knowing there are too many witnesses around at that moment. While reprimands were common in the Winner household, it seems to appear that praise or congratulations were not. Time and again, Eustace looks for praise from others any chance he gets, signaling that it's not something he often gets at home. Excelsius never once praises Eustace or gives him a genuine compliment on screen. All he ever does is call him an idiot while Eustace quietly sits back and takes it. In his mind chess, Eustace says that he only became a prosecutor in the first place because he wanted to be useful to his dad, which is not something a child should ever feel. A parent-child relationship should never be transactional like that, and love shouldn't be conditioned on whether or not the child is of use to the parent. It sounds like Eustace thought if he just did well enough, his father would actually be proud of him for once, but that was never going to be the case. It was just a false hope. And Eustace probably knew this from the beginning, seeing as he tells him, "You've hated me for as long as I can remember." But he still tried, because he was so desperate to have his own father tell him he did good. Even still, after admitting that his father never loved him, he says that he still looked up to his dad. It's not that easy to stop loving someone, even when being abused, and that is something that's painfully clear during Excelsius's trial. Eustace did everything he could to get a shred of evidence against his dad, but in the end, he couldn't do it on his own. He still loved his father and couldn't bring himself to incarcerate him until Edgeworth gave him his support. After Eustace finally stands up for himself, Excelsius tries to exert that parent-child power dynamic again, saying that Eustace needs him and will never make it on his own, until Eustace finally decides that he'll be okay without Excelsius. Personally, I love this final scene because he acknowledges him as his dad one last time before calling him by his name, thereby disowning him just as Excelsius did to him that morning, which I'd like to step back to. As Edgeworth was piecing together that Excelsius was the one behind Rosie Ringer's murder, he concludes that the killer must have a burn mark on their face. Eustace reacts to this statement, realizing that his father really was the killer, but he can't bring himself to believe it. He continues to defend his father even still, not realizing that his father, who hates him so much, just wants him to leave. And so, Excelsius makes him go by destroying his son's entire sense of self. A large part of Eustace's personality is his achievements. He places great emphasis on winning, having awards and good grades, and he even continues to wear a school uniform and valedictorian jacket despite appearing to have already graduated, seeing as he's officially a prosecutor, because he's so proud of his school and the accomplishments he made there. This is why it's all the more heartbreaking to watch Excelsius tear everything Eustace held dear away from him in one fell swoop. He doesn't just come out and say it, no. He waits for Eustace to defend himself first. He knows he's smart because of all his tests. He won all those awards and graduated top of his class. He did good, right? In response, Excelsius makes it clear that everything was because of him. He bribed all the teachers, put his friends as judges for his debates. Eustace never learned a thing at Themis. Nobody even cared enough to teach him anything. Not even after Verity started using him to get information on Excelsius, she just covered for him. At the end of Excelsius's tirade, he disowns Eustace, claiming that he's no son of his, causing Eustace to run out in tears. This was a massive blow to Eustace's psyche, and nobody even seems to care that much afterwards. Of course, Edgeworth, Franziska, and Verity seem to feel bad for the kid, but nobody goes after him or even attempts to search for him when he goes missing. During Verity's mind chess, she says that she's worried about him too, but that he's an adult and can reappear on his own. That's just not true. Eustace is still only 17. He's a child who just found out not only is his father a murderer, but everything he thought he once knew was a lie. He's in a very precarious mental state and could be at the risk of doing something drastic, but because he's seen as adult enough, nobody cares. When Edgeworth and Kay find him kidnapped in his own house, Eustace is very clearly traumatized from now having been tied up and thrown in the trunk of a car, not knowing where he was being taken until being unloaded in his garage. And may I just add, he was unknowingly placed right next to the duffel bag full of the president of Zheng Fa's bones. When the cops recover that bag from his home and Eustace realizes there were human bones in his house and he was right next to them, that's going to be another thing he has to talk about in therapy. The kidnappers told him to blame whoever owns this house, making Eustace realize his own father was behind all of it. During his mind chess, Eustace asks if it is possible his dad wanted to kill him. The fact that that thought even crossed his mind speaks volumes. And Edgeworth doesn't even deny the possibility. He only says that Excelsius wouldn't kill him in the family garage because then he'd be the prime suspect. If Eustace had been taken anywhere else, though, it would have been a distinct possibility. All of that is a moot point, though, since Eustace was never even supposed to be kidnapped in the first place. Excelsius's goons were just incompetent and grabbed the first kid they saw that knew Gavel. But it also speaks to the fact that they didn't even know what their own boss's son looks like. Excelsius truly did not care for Eustace at all. Speaking of Eustace's parents, where did his mom go? Excelsius mentions once that she just disappeared one day, all while performing his crocodile tears to get sympathy, but we as the audience know Excelsius's track record with making people disappear. So that begs the question, why? Why did he kill her? We know she couldn't have been sent to jail. If she was, she wouldn't be missing. Everyone would know where she disappeared to. She must have died early on in Eustace's life, as he never seems to mention or remember her at all. Was she in the way somehow to Excelsius? How so? Did she maybe try to expose his crimes? Or even just stop him from hurting Eustace? It's hard to tell quite where his line for murder is. The only murders we know he committed or took part in are for the President Dezhen Wang and Rosie Ringer. There was significant benefit for him to help with the presidential assassination, and Ringer had tried to expose his crimes, so we can't know for certain how petty his murders could get. It's also sort of odd to me that Excelsius is 68, while his son is only 17. He would have been 51 when he was born. How old was his wife? Even if she was in her 40s, it would probably have to be closer to her early 40s, which is still a significant age gap if they were married around their 20s to 30s. And why choose to have a child so late in life? Unless Eustace was an accident, which I can definitely see. I'm thinking way too much about this. Let's move on. One last topic I'd like to talk about more in depth is Eustace's lack of education. Most people likely wrote him off as stupid when he really isn't. He just doesn't know anything. He's led to believe that he doesn't need to pay attention because everything is just done for him anyways, and he's told he's a genius for it. In Themis, the teachers likely never bothered to teach him anything since Excelsius was specifically bribing them to keep him stupid and manipulatable. The students probably never helped him since he was likely annoying, so nobody wanted to be his friend, and therefore nobody found out he actually needed help, and they probably thought he knew his grades were fake. The more left behind a child is in education, the harder it is to catch up. It's hard to tell what his highest proper form of education is. It could end at elementary, or it could even end at basic reading, writing, and math. How long has Excelsius been bribing his education? Was he homeschooled before Themis? And going back a step, does he have any friends? He never seems to know anyone outside of law enforcement. Does he actually know anyone his own age? Of course, now being Edgeworth's protege, he may make friends with Kay, but before that, it really seems like the only people Eustace knew were those wanting to use him for their own goals, manipulating him and hurting him. Everything he went through was normalized to him. He had no outside perspective. All he knew was that his grades told him he was smart, no matter how much his father berated him. Right? And that is about all my thoughts on Mr. Eustace Winner. He was a child who just wanted to make his dad proud, and in the end got more trauma than he ever needed. He was repeatedly denied an education, used by all the adults he was supposed to be able to trust, berated and hurt again and again by his own dad, kidnapped for no reason, and ignored all the while until Edgeworth took him under his wing. I do have to wonder, though, how is his life after the events of the game? Does he now own his house? Did he have a legal guardian until he turned 18? Who was it? How's he doing now? Is he a successful prosecutor? Has he gotten smarter? After the 7-year gap, he'd have to be the same age as Clavier, in his 20s now. I'd love to see at least a cameo in a future game, just to see how he's doing. I also need to see him get out of that atrocious uniform and into his own suit. Perhaps he'd have something ruffly to emulate his new mentor. Well, that'll have to be all for now. Thanks for listening, and until next time!